Welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague, Russell Berger, both attorneys at Offit Kurman. And today we are talking about client use of AI. So, our clients often obviously search AI for things. We've mentioned it a couple of times here and there in our episodes. And often, sometimes we'll get on a call with a client and they've got one of those note takers that's very hard to get rid of. They show up and the client doesn't know that they're even there. And we're like, what's this note taker? There's a lot of those things going on. So obviously there's a lot of new tools that people are using and are excited to use and often can be used safely and it can be a good tool for people. But something that we're really talking with clients about paying attention to is making sure that they're not destroying attorney client privilege and confidentiality, which is something that is really important in the client and attorney relationship. Because if it's not protected and you go talking to people about things, so before AI, there would be the telling everyone at a bar that you did something a problem, right? So that's not protected. That's not confidential. That's not privileged. But when you talk to us about it, if we're your attorney, it is. That's a basic concept. There's a lot more nuance to it. But now we have folks who are going and putting things into AI, specifically sometimes open AI, which means that the terms and service of that open AI says that they can share it, which essentially is like telling the world whatever you just told AI. So it's very different than coming to us. And there's been some recent cases on this where clients have gone and used AI prior to hiring an attorney and then provided that what they found in AI to their attorney and then tried to assert that it was privileged or confidential because now they've handed it over to the attorney. And without going too deep into the weeds, that's not a good practice to engage in because there's a lot of reasons that could be susceptible to being turned over to the other side in litigation or being produced. So, what are some things, Russell, with that framework that clients should really be thinking about as it relates to using these tools and anything that touches legal or case or anything like that?
Yeah, certainly when it touches legal, and we talked about this a little bit on an episode we did a few weeks ago on what to do when you find out you've gotten sued. And one of the things we said not to do was to go run it all through ChatGPT and have it spit out your defense. Yeah, so don't do that. I mean, the risk there, as you mentioned, is that anything your communication with the AI program is not privileged and it's out there in a very public way. And maybe there's some arguments in certain types of terms and conditions, but it's much better to tell your lawyer you want your lawyer to leverage AI tools to help flesh out ideas than for you to do it yourself. And I think that makes sense anyway, because if you had a car and it could only go 25 miles an hour, and then we built an engine that could go 100 miles an hour, you'd want someone that was a professional driver at 25 miles an hour to be the person handling the wheel at 100 miles an hour and it's going 4 times faster. It's kind of the same thing with AI and legal. It's not, especially at this stage, and maybe this will change in the not too distant future, but for now, like, AI is imperfect. It has inaccuracies. I was at a conference where someone said it's right about 80% of the time, and that's probably gone up a little bit since I heard that statement. But I heard 80% of the time, I think, well, that's terrible from a legal perspective because it is. And we should strive for much, much higher accuracy than that. And that's okay. You can be right 4 out of 5 times, but that's a pretty high failure rate when you're talking about legal issues. And so you want someone who knows how to operate this high powered, fast tool, because if you don't, it's just as likely to drive you off the cliff fast. You have that accident faster because it's not more accurate than human attorneys at this stage. And again, I think we could be doing this in 6 months, 12 months, a couple years, whatever. And that might not be the case anymore. That's certainly where we're headed. But I think from a privilege standpoint and from an accuracy standpoint, you want to leverage AI in a way in conjunction with your attorney under your attorney's supervision, as opposed to just going off and doing it on your own, where you haven't read the terms of the software you're using, where it's not being directed by an attorney. There isn't someone that knows the legal ins and outs who's reviewing the output. And even if you're going to put it into an AI bot and then hand that printout to your attorney, I think we've made this joke before. It'd be like walking into the doctor's office with a printout from WebMD. You don't need to do that, and you can certainly work with your attorney to figure out the best ways to use this new high power tool, which we should be using, and we are pro using this technology, but using it in a safe, productive, privileged kind of way.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly to those points. Anything that's high stakes, also, and high something that's important to you from a legal perspective, you're going to ultimately end up talking to an attorney. So start there instead, as opposed to because obviously we have the handing WebMD is a great analogy because people come with something that I've got a fully baked something, and here you go. You won't have to do anything, and that's just it's never the case, right?
Yeah.
And so
It
it
reminds me
it's
of the
a
time I punched in some symptoms I had into WebMD, and it told me I had network connectivity issues.
yeah, yeah, love it. Yeah, so definitely you're gonna have to go and talk to the professional. So just start with that step. I think that's really the main takeaway. And I think those are all great points. We're gonna make use of it. It's a good tool, but you really have to be very careful as it relates to these topics.
That's for sure.
All right. Well, thanks, Russell. We'll see you next time.
Hi, Sarah.